Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next session. My name is Martina Grom, and I'm here together with my colleague, Toni Pohl, and we are co-presenting on a session around Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 Groups PowerShell MasterClass. I just discovered on the slide that we haven't renamed it yet, and Office 365 Groups are now renamed to Microsoft 365 Groups.
Hello from Vienna from my side. I want to point out I just presented Azure Automation Accounts. We will have a look at that very quickly in this session as well. So if you're interested in that, let's have a look at the Automation Account session, because I think it's very beneficial when working with PowerShell.
Yeah, we both are located in Vienna, Austria. Hope you are well. Hope you have a good time with the virtual marathon around Microsoft 365 technologies. So to jump to the next slide, it's co-presented with a SharePoint conference, which is also renamed to Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, and will hopefully happen next March in Las Vegas again. And please also join their list. Thanks to our sponsors, it's incredibly important that we have sponsors for community conferences. Do not ever forget that, and also look at their solutions, because they help the community to stay alive and to stay colorful. And if you want to go more virtual, you have also the benefit to win an Oculus Quest all in one. So you have to submit answers into a raffle, and then you can win one in each location. And also consider donating to a GoFundMe charity project around persons who support COVID-19, and go into that. So our first topic around Microsoft 365 Groups and Microsoft Teams PowerShell class is we want to show you the Microsoft 365 platform, and the thing around that and why we wanted to describe that is that you have a base identity, and the identity system as well as Microsoft Graph are always on the bottom if we talk about Microsoft 365 groups and also about Microsoft Teams. So what we will do around Microsoft 365 groups in this session is we want to share our real life experience and knowledge around how we can provision Microsoft 365 groups, how we can manage them, how we can streamline the creation and use of collaboration features, and also how you can help yourself with self-service capabilities if you have governance in place and if you need to have support and self-service in place. So the first thing, which is really fundamental, is to understand Microsoft 365 groups. And see on that slide, I already renamed it. The main topic is, and it's very important to understand how that works, is if you look at Microsoft 365 from a service perspective, we always have at the bottom Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory is our identity service and is the baseline for any Microsoft 365 service you are connecting to. And then we have Microsoft 365 groups, and very often I get the question, Martina, why do I get a group when I provision Planner? Martina, why do I need a group if I provision Stream? Why do I get an Office 365 group if I just want a Yammer community?
Or a Microsoft 365 group.
Or a Microsoft 365 group. And you see, the thing is, and from an architectural perspective, Microsoft 365 groups are in the middle and are the basis for everything. So that means if you provision an Microsoft 365 group, you get Stream, you get an Exchange mailbox, you also get SharePoint, the SharePoint team site. You can provision Microsoft Teams on top of the Microsoft 365 group. You get a Yammer community if you want that, and you also get planner, and all other services. And with that concept, you have access to Microsoft 365 groups, you have owners, you have members, you have guests, and so on. And you can also go into advanced sharing scenarios. And on the right side, what we also have here is Microsoft Graph, of course, because you can also use Graph to deploy Microsoft 365 groups, to query them, to put solutions on top of them, and you can also use the Power Platform for Microsoft 365 groups management. And you see, there's also a rich partner ecosystem where you have various partners who work through Graph and the Power Platform to give governance and security into Microsoft 365 groups.
So Microsoft 365 groups are really beneficial for all these services like Outlook, PowerPoint, Stream, Staff Hub, Teams, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So what we will show you today is how to manage Microsoft 365 groups and Microsoft Teams at scale. So we will show you how you can connect to PowerShell, what PowerShells you will need. Then we go through some Microsoft 365 groups essentials and also through Teams essentials. And also we will look at some basic governance functions, like how you can implement an expiration policy, how you can do soft delete, or how can you restore a previously Microsoft 365 group, and also how you can manage owners and members of a group, and how you can do team management with PowerShell as well. And that is the baseline you need if you go into PowerShell. So first of all, you have to install the latest PowerShell modules to have it in here. So first of all, you need Microsoft Teams. A pro tip is always update your PowerShells if you start it from scratch, because they update them very often. You have new update settings for Teams and so on. Also, you can use Azure Active Directory Preview PowerShells or the Azure Active Directory PowerShells, whatever you prefer. And with that, you also need Office 365 Groups PowerShells, the Security and Compliance Center PowerShells, and then brand new, we have the Exchange Online PowerShells version 2 modules, which is also very useful to look at that, because with the new Exchange Online PowerShells, you can scale, it's more easy, and it's also very performant with those new PowerShells. And then, as always, there is a new Graph PowerShell as well in the beta Graph, and Toni will show you that as well.
So the good message here is we will need everything to manage our Microsoft 365 groups. So basically that's it with the slides here. So now we want to show you how it works in real life here. And we have a bunch of scripts which are also available on Martina's GitHub repository. We will show you the link afterwards. So the first part is how can we connect to the Microsoft 365 ecosystem with PowerShell. Again, we are using a bunch of PowerShell modules. So here we are using in our samples Microsoft Teams, the Azure AD Preview or Azure AD, whatever you prefer, as Martina mentioned. We connect to Microsoft Teams, we connect to the Azure AD module, and we are still using the Remote Exchange PowerShells. I have added here below, if you want to use the new Exchange Online PowerShell version 2 module, this is currently in preview. This is how you get help here, and this is how you would connect to that if you want to use that for managing your Office or Microsoft 365 groups here.
And also to add to that, why are the new Exchange Online PowerShells that important? Microsoft is moving away from basic authentication when you use PowerShells and so on, and the new Exchange Online PowerShells support modern auth. The old one does that too as well, but they are more performant.
There are a couple of benefits if you use the new version 2 modules, but again, there's not the full functionality, not everything which came to the Remote Exchange PowerShell over the years. So I'm not sure how many commands are in there, maybe something like 25 or so. So there's still way to improve that from a Microsoft side, but it will definitely replace the old PowerShell module. Yeah. The remote exchange PowerShell module. Yeah. So first we want to connect to our demo tenant. So we have here the get credentials, and there's one important thing I want to line out. So let me start this here. I've already started my terminal here, and it should ask us for a user and a password. So I simply copy that from my KeyPass here to authenticate with a global administrator of that tenant and with the password for that user. And while we use the Connect Microsoft Teams and Connect Azure AD, if you want to use the same credentials, you have to use this here to say, okay, make the password read only. If you don't do that, the password will be removed from the RAM of the computer, and you cannot use it more than once. That's a security mechanism. So ensure this line here is really important if you want to do more tasks with various modules as we do here. So currently we have connected against Team, or we are using the PowerShell module for Teams, for Azure AD Preview, and for Exchange for doing the management of the Microsoft 365 group. Okay, once we've done that, let's start with our basic things. How can we manage groups here? Well, there's one commandlet that's called get unified group. So if I run this here, we will get a list of all the Office or Microsoft 365 groups that are existing in that tenant here.
Yeah, and also what is important here, what you see here, we formatted the list like that. You see the display name of the group, and you also see what group type do you have. And you see within Azure Active Directory, and Microsoft 365 group is called an universal group. This is also something. And also what you see here is you also see the primary SMTP address, because you can also email a group if you want that.
And of course, you can also change the email address, for example, or add another user to be able to be a sender for that group, and so on.
Yeah.
So these are typical tasks you want to manage in your environment, in your organization.
Yeah, and especially in times like that, where a lot of companies onboard into Microsoft Teams, that list can be pretty long, and you need to manage that on scale, and PowerShell is much easier than going through the Teams admin center.
Exactly, and much better to automate here. So we have also included some extended scripts here, like showing only specific information here, and see who is the manager of this group, for example.
Yeah, from a governance perspective, what you see here, managed by means owned by. And that also means it's very important if you have a self-provisioning service and people can create their own groups and teams and so on. It's always a good advice that you have at least 2 owners for every single team and group, because that means if you have more than one owner and one owner leaves the company, leaves the team or anything else, the group doesn't get ownerless, and you do not have to take care about that because you still have one owner. So it's a good practice to have at least 2 owners in every single Microsoft 365 group.
Or just to get a list of all the groups that are, for example, private or public, if you want to say, I want to reorganize that or something like this. So this is useful just to filter the unified group experience here. Okay, so now we have simply got all the information of our tenant here. So let's continue. Give us all the teams. Here we are using the Teams PowerShells that start with My, for example. Some of them are Teams as well. So currently we have this My Monday project, My Tuesday project. If I want to create a new project, today is Thursday, I simply can execute this new team here with these parameters and with the visibility, and then this new team will be provisioned. In the meantime, so this was actually very quick, so this can take some time here. Let me show you the result of that. And here is my Thursday project. So here I'm logged in as the global administrator, and you can see that my Thursday project is already existing here, which we just provisioned.
And you also see if you go that way. So for instance, you can use that for templating teams or provision a lot of teams at the right time. you see it works pretty well. You can also add owners and members and also different channels, what Toni will show you in a minute.
Exactly, yes. So let's go back to our Visual Studio code. If I want to work with that group here, I simply copy the group ID here and say, now let me get all the channels of that group here. Let's run this here. So we'll see that this new team here has only a general channel, which we saw here in the browser. And of course, I can create new channels here easily with PowerShell as well. So let me run this here, the new My Tango channel, for example. And if I go back to my browser, which is here on the other screen, we have now this new hidden channel here. That's my Tango channel. You see that the Teams commandlets are really quick. They are very fast, and you can try, or you can see the result immediately. See some member settings here, for example, get teams. Get team with the group ID also gives you information about the properties of that team, like, for example, the mail nickname with the default domain, the description, and all these settings we have here, like allow this or that property.
And this is also kind of important if you want to have different strategies in different teams, that you see, okay, I do not want to allow GIFs in selected teams because we don't need them. Or if you just want to change some settings in selected teams, you can very easily do that on a per team level.
Or, for example, you could also add team users, like here we have created this team here. So currently we have, it's a little bit tricky to switch to the other browser here in the other window, but here we are. So that's my Thursday project here. If we go to the members here, we will see, or
manage team.
Manage team would be maybe the better approach here. And there's currently only one owner, that's the Martina administrator user. So let's go here and add some members to that group. So let's take this here and go to our browser. We should see that there are now these 3 new members added with PowerShell.
And also what you can do, you can afterwards, you can promote one of the other members to be a second owner of the team.
Exactly, yeah. So what you could do here in the GUI, you can also do with PowerShell as well. If you want to remove a user, that would be the user Diego. Simply run this here, and we should see that this user is now gone. So Diego should be removed in a second or so.
Now you see already the count is there, but we need to refresh the page that Diego will be removed from that as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's very easy to manage these groups. If you want to change something, what Martina mentioned before, like saying, I don't want to allow GIFs, or I want to change something, like here, you can use the set team commandlet to say, I want to change the email address, for example, of that group, or the classification or the visibility or something. So if I run this here, let's see how quick this goes. We have changed that group here, and you can already see my new team here.
So it's really a very fast approach if you go through PowerShell, because changes go into effect immediately, and you see how it runs there. And let's look, see, Diego is also gone.
Exactly. Okay, so if you want to get the team members here, again, we can ask for that with the get team here, or we already showed that, sorry. The fund settings, for example, if you want to set them, just to mention that, to say allow Giphy true or false, this would be the syntax. We have, in the past, we had extra commandlets for that. Let's set team fund settings. They are gone now. So now we only have get team and set team.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you do not want to have fun in your team, just restrict the Giphy content settings.
And
or if you do not trust Facebook, could be both reasons.
Exactly. If you want to remove a channel, we just created the My Tango channel. We can also use the remove channel. So this is gone immediately. You can see that this is now away. And here we have also, want to point out, if you want to remove the general channel, that's not possible.
Yeah, the general channel is the default channel. Every team gets provisioned by default. You can't rename that, and you also can't remove that. And this is also, it makes a lot of sense because every single team needs a general channel where people can interact with and so on. But what you can do is you can remove every other channel you have created within the team.
Exactly. We can see that there's now only this one general channel here, and just want to point out as well, of course you can do the same things with the Microsoft Graph API. Simply go to that endpoint here, groups, then with the group ID, and then you can more or less execute all these statements from a programmatic standpoint without the PowerShell modules as well. Just if you want to do it from, let's say, an Azure function in C# or something like this. Okay, with that, let's switch gears a little bit and go to the other commandlets that are useful, like, for example, the current settings with the lifecycle policy. So if I run this here, let's see if there in that tenant, if there already is a lifecycle policy in place. And we see, yes, it is. There's one that says, okay, all groups are valid for 32 days here. That's the lifetime.
Yeah.
And after that time, they expire.
Yeah, and let me outline that a little bit and stay on that. So the group lifetime is dependent on two factors. The first factor is the group currently in use? So that means if it receives email, if you have channel messages in there, if there are documents in there, and so on, the group will never expire. But it can happen that the group is no longer used. No email, no communication, no chat, nothing happens in the group. And that means it might happen that you end up with a lot of dead groups in your tenant. And to avoid that, I would highly recommend that you set up a group's expiration policy. And the group expiration policy does remind the owner of the team or the group that, okay, this group is no longer used. Do you want to keep it or should we delete it? And the expiration policy, the default value or the minimum value if you go into a custom setting is 31 days. And that means if a group is no longer used, the owner gets the message, says, okay, this group will be deleted in 30 days, in 15 days, in 1 day. This group was deleted 1 day ago. Do you still want to restore that? So if you consider that from a governance perspective, again, turn on groups expiration, let groups expire because people don't need groups anymore. They can go away. If you have groups you need to archive and you need to keep out of whatever reason, you can put a retention policy on those groups and they will get into a soft deleted state, but they will never be deleted. So you will never lose the content if you want that. So don't be afraid about the group expiration policy. It saves you a ton of time because you do not have to look at that, and it works pretty awesome.
So this would be the UI in the Azure portal. If you do it with that way, if you do it with PowerShell, it's the get Azure ADMS group lifecycle policy. We can see there is one existing. This is exactly what we saw in the Azure portal. We could remove it, create a new one, or we can modify it. We say, okay, this is the idea of that lifecycle policy. Let's set it to 35 days, for example, for all groups. And if I run this here, we should see the result here in the Explorer instantly, more or less. So it doesn't matter in which way you do it. You can see it's now set to 35 days. Mm-hmm. So that's also helpful to do this from PowerShell. For example, also for selected groups, if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, of course, you could also remove it and play around with that lifecycle policy, but it's a useful part in the whole governance part of managing Office 365 groups. What Martina already mentioned is the deletion of groups. So, for example, we can use the get Azure AD group commandlet to say, give me all the groups that start with my, for example. We've renamed our My Thursday team to My New Team. We can also remove that group here. So let's do that. So take that GUI GUID here and say we want to delete that group with PowerShell. So this should be gone now. So if I run this commandlet here again, we should see it's gone immediately, and it should also be gone from our Teams Explorer, which was somewhere from Teams. Let me refresh that. It should be removed in the next minute or so. Or let's see if the reload works. Yeah. So now this group has, no, it's still here. So it will be removed in the next 12 minutes or so. But anyway, we see if we ask with PowerShell, this group has been deleted. Of course, we can query for all the groups that are still in the soft deleted state. So let's run this here. And here you can see my new team with that GUID. Is in the list, and I could restore it within 30 days.
Yeah, and you also see when a group were deleted, and Toni did a cleanup today. You see a lot of groups which go into the soft deleted state, and the beauty around that is if a group is soft deleted, you have 30 days to restore it. So the data is not lost, you simply can undelete a soft deleted group very easily.
But to mention, if it's a group with a lot of content, with a lot of SharePoint storage or SharePoint files or Exchange mailbox chat, or etc., this undelete can take a lot of time. Yeah. So it can take hours maybe.
So to give you a practical example, recently one of our largest group was accidentally deleted, and it took us almost 12 hours to have the full content available again.
The command for that is easy. It's called restore Azure ADMS delete directory object. So I have now undeleted that my new team here, and it will be restored from now on. If you really want to hard delete it, there's also a commandlet for that. In that case, we would have no option to really undelete it. Yeah. It would be really removed.
Yeah, and also be careful with that kind of comment, because the group, it means the group will be deleted. And of course, you can open a Microsoft service request and ask them if they can restore the group, but it will take you a while. So only hard delete the group when it's really necessary and you really feel the urge and need to do that.
To underline that, Martina, so you call a hard deleted group a deleted group.
Genau.
Okay, good. Let's have a look at the owners. So how can you modify that? So for example, here we want to do a little bit of governance. We want to get a list of all the groups that are available in our tenant that have less than 2 owners.
Yeah.
So let me execute that here.
As I already mentioned, it's a good approach from a governance perspective to have at least 2 owners per group and to have them here. And you see, we have some groups which do not have more than 1 owner. So you can query that, and then you can either go create an email message for the owners and say, please add a second owner, or you can also choose 1 owner for the other ones.
This is what we do in the script here. For example, we have created that my Thursday, my new team, which only had the administrator as an owner. So we could now simply say, I want to get a list of all the ownerless groups with less than 2 owners. And now I run through that list here and add these 2 owners to these groups here. So that would be the method how you can more or less restore that and say every group that has only 1 owner, I add someone from the IT department or the substitute of that department or something like this. So you can do that programmatically easily, and this would be a perfect approach for using an automation account. Let me show you that quickly how you would do that. So if I go in here, I have an automation account in Azure. And I have some runbook. So every script is called runbook here. And for example, I have a runbook that's called get teams here. And if I look in that, you will see I'm using the same commands. In that case, I'm using the connect Microsoft Teams, what we did in our first script. And then I say, please give me a list of all the teams that are existing in that tenant here, and then simply do an output of that. And the beauty of that is I can run it here. We are in environment that allows me to store credentials, that allows me to have a log mechanism for everything that runs in here. I can add the modules here, and I can check the output. For example, I could write the output on Azure Storage and then continue to work with that data here in that Azure environment. So we will come to that. It takes a little time to be deployed with that environment to a virtual machine where it's executed, and when it's executed, we will return to that output here and see that we see the same result as if I would run it here on my local machine. Okay, what else can you do here with the add unified commandlets here? So for example, you could modify the owner of a team. So the group is called my new team here in my case. So I can say I want to add that user, Miriam, as an additional owner of that team. So let me run that here.
So why do you need to add it as a member and as an owner? Do you have any explanation for me? I just want her to be an owner. Isn't she automatically a member as well?
Yeah, this has a little bit of history. So these commandlets here, if you add an owner, that the user is not automatically added as a member, so that could have unwanted side effects. So the best practice here is to really add the user as a member and an owner. So that's our real life experience here.
And also the direction is kind of important. Please first add it as a member and then promote the member as to an owner to be an owner. You can have some unwanted side effects if it's not here yet.
In our case, this commandlet here takes a little bit longer, obviously. So let's see if it's now in here. No, Miriam is not showing up here, but it will maybe take a minute or so. But our commandlet should be faster or not. So I think I have it here. So get the team user of that group here. So let me try that. Get all the members of that group here and run only these two lines here. We should now see that Miriam here, well, she hasn't been a user before, but I have added her as member and owner. So the command that shows the result immediately. Yeah,
and the interesting part here in the table, you see Miriam, you don't see her twice as a member and an owner, you see her only once. But believe me, it's the best approach first to add her as a member and then as an owner. This is, by the way, also true if you do that through Microsoft Graph. It's the same system here.
Exactly, because it's the same functionality behind. Let's have a look in our automation account in the meantime if something here happened. Yes, here we go. So we see the output. We see the same command, get the teams in the Azure Automation account, just as a proof that you can also work in that environment with your PowerShell scripts as well. Okay, let's go to our other functionality we have in here. Of course, you can also remove the team user with that commandlet as well. So if I run this here and say, give me all the users again, this line, Miriam should be gone. And this really works fast.
Yeah, and you also see she isn't an owner any longer, just because you remove the member from the team.
Exactly. Okay, other useful things you can do here in the management is like hiding. How can you hide a group from the Outlook client? And there are two commandlets or two ways what you can do. So the first one is, let's run the get unified group just to show us what kind of groups we have in here. So there are still a bunch of groups here, and one of them is the my new team. So again, I would take the ID of that group here and say, I want to work with that group here. And then I could say, hide this group from the address list, for example.
Yeah.
So that would be the commandlet for that.
So why does that happen? By default, if you create the team directly, it will not show up in Outlook. But in previous times, it was not the default setting in there. So many customers of us, they complained, they said, I want to have the team, but I do not want to see the team in my Outlook client. So how can I hide that? And this is the commandlet to do so. And you can also do that in bulk around all your teams. and hide them from the address list and also from Outlook.
Exactly. So in this sample, we are simply filtering all the groups. They're starting with my and say we want to hide these groups from the address list with that loop here.
And also there are two specifics. You can hide them from the address list. So for instance, if you do not want to have email access to the team and you do not want people to email in bulk to certain teams, you can just hide it from the address list. Or if you do not want to see the group in Outlook or in your Outlook web app, you can also hide it from your Exchange client.
Exactly. So the next topic that's useful here is to say I want to get all the groups that are, for example, public, and I want to reorganize them. So let's have a look what kind of groups we have in our tenant here. Again, I'm using the get unified group commandlet, and you can see we have some groups that are public and we have some groups that are private.
Yeah, why is that important? And you also, you know, as we talked about that in the introduction, we live in Europe and data privacy is very important to us. And very often we get questions from people who discover Delph or other things, and they said, I suddenly see data I do not have access to. And very often the reason behind that is that a public team was created. And the public team just means everyone in the organization gets reads and edit access to the team. And that also means that everyone who works, so for instance, if I work with Toni, and Toni is part of the public sales and marketing groups, and he adds and edit documents in there, and I go to his Delph dashboard, I will see the recent documents there because I have access to them. And very often I see that with my customers that public teams were created by accident and people just don't want that. But they said, yeah, it's a public group because we want to have it in our organization and so on. And then they blame Delph for showing up content they have access to. So to avoid that, and from a best practice perspective, please check your public groups. Talk to the owner of the public group if that was their intention. And if it wasn't their intention, you can very easily change the access type from public to private and vice versa as well. And the second example could be there is you can also, if you have a classification in place, for instance, and you have strictly confidential groups, you can also create a policy where said a confidential group couldn't be public. Because it's confidential, it always needs to be private. And the access level is kind of a key scenario here. Always think about that. A public team means everyone within SharePoint has read and edit rights to every document in the public group.
Which is maybe not the wanted scenario.
Or it wasn't the intention in first place, yeah.
So if you want to identify all the groups, for example, as Martina mentioned, that are, let's say, public, to reorganize them, that would be these groups here in our tenant. And here you can see that we use the set unified group here and set the access type here to private, also in a loop here in a for each, and say all these groups shall now be private, please. And from a management perspective, that's easy. That's technically very easy to do. And you can see this is currently running and all the groups should be private by now without a lot of effort. So if I run this again here, let's say get unified group here. Sooner or later, we should see the results. So currently, sometimes I have the problem that my Visual Studio Code doesn't work properly, so which happens right now. So I simply paste that command in here just to see the result, that we see that all the groups are now set to private. Again, we could also do this vice versa, but of course, always the team owner should be responsible for the content and he should be aware what kind of group he creates. And again, historically, often public teams have been created by accident or by simply not knowing. So this is the method how the administrators can more or less fix this.
Yeah, and also consider that if you have a tenant with a lot of teams and groups, PowerShell might rescue you if your management says, okay, can you please urgently change the access level from public to private for all of the teams in our tenant. Yeah.
Okay, so there's also another useful script here that's working with Exchange. So for example, if you say, I want that a specific user gets sent as permissions in the name of the group, so that he in Outlook can say, I'm not sending from my personal account, but I'm sending from the group, because every group has an email address. So if we do this here, we can simply say, give us all the group recipients for that team here, my Tuesday project, for example, and I want to add, in that case, Nestor Wilke. And now I have to run this here manually because my F8 key no longer works. But this is done quickly, so simply want to get all the recipients here in that object. This is an Exchange commandlet, and now simply let's have a look at that. So currently we have only this email address, the MS Teams something, recipient type, that's the mailbox of that group. And if you want to add that recipient here, I simply run this here and say I want to add Nestor Wilke, and he has the permission for that mailbox to send as or has full access to that mailbox.
Yeah, and a good approach might be if you have a Microsoft 365 group, which is kind of a replacement for distribution lists or anything else, you can just use the send as permissions that the members of the group can also mail in behalf of that group ownership. So for instance, if there is an office group or info or sales or whatever group. Okay. So also, yeah.
Actually, we could also show a flow that's provisioning a new team or a SharePoint site with these commandlets. So that's more or less the basic tool set, how you can manage Office or Microsoft 365 groups. I have to get used to the Microsoft 365, still saying Office 365, but you can more or less really manage these groups from outside as an administrator with these PowerShells.
Yeah. And also, that being said, we are a little bit ahead of time and hopefully get some questions we are happy to answer. We're going back to the slides. And our key takeaways today is please look into the PowerShell modules for Teams and Microsoft 365 groups and use them at scale with Azure Automation Accounts or Azure Functions. Toni had a separate session on how Azure Automation Accounts and Azure Functions work. The key benefit here is you do not have to have a lot of administrators running the PowerShells. You can just create runbooks, and the administrators start the runbooks from there, or you can schedule the tasks and stuff like that. So this can be done with an Azure Automation Account. And also what you have seen is PowerShell scales a lot. If you have to manage a lot of groups and teams, PowerShell can really help you in your day-to-day administration. And that said, if you want to have those scripts we currently showed, go into my GitHub. They're here. You can download them for free. And if you have any questions for us, just contact us via Twitter, at work, or Grom if you want that. And also, thank you for joining us today. And we are happy to stay here for a while and answer your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.